Greetings, junior adventurers. I am the mysterious Arrow of the Gods. Now, you may be wondering where author monkey Rick Walteri is. Well, I can assure you, he's safe. As for me, he asked me to step in today to read to you from yet another of his Shingles stories. This one called Sense and Sensibility and Sasquatch, Shingles Book 14. Now, why me? I think it's because this book was designed pretty much to piss everybody off. Jane Austen fans, which the author, Rick Walteri, who I am not, assures you he has nothing against. Jane Austen fans, they tend to be rather protective of her works, and this kind of shit's all over it. And Shingles readers tend not to like Jane Austen's works, so obviously the prose in this will probably piss them off. But the author monkey wants you to know that this story makes him laugh, so ultimately that's really all that counts. But since I'm not him, that's neither here nor there. I am here instead to read you an excerpt from this fine, probably never to be a classic story. So here is Sense and Sensibility and Sasquatch, Chapter 5. Marianne awoke the next morning to the sound of Margaret vomiting upon herself, but soon a commotion caught her ear. She stepped outside and was delighted to find that Willoughby had come calling as promised. Several men stood outside, all putting their guns his way, but she was quick to step in front of them. "Give Krunk grubs!" The men may have shot him regardless of Marianne's presence between their bullets and his body, but Mrs. Dashwood appeared and received Willoughby into their cabin with more than politeness, wishing for all present to know they were in the presence of superior morality. Though she might die this day, at least they would know she did not die impolite. With an unwarranted kindness, the beast was brought inside and offered tea, at which point he threatened to crush all of the Dashwood's heads with a large rock. Mrs. Dashwood, never one to be ruffled, had dealt with difficult guests before, and thus, after securing a few cockroaches for Willoughby's tea, they all settled down to an uncomfortable discourse. It was not necessary to mention any favorite amusement to engage Marianne to talk. She yammered on about a great many things of unimportance, all of which Willoughby either snarled, grunted, or defecated copiously in response to, filling their modest cabin with a stench so foul it almost caused Margaret to stir from her drunken slumber. "And what of music, good Willoughby?" "Krunk like to smack trees with sticks. Make good noise." When she heard him declare that of music and dancing he was passionately fond, Marianne gave him such a look of approbation as secured the largest share of his discourse to herself for the rest of his stay. She speedily explained their enjoyment of dancing and music was mutual, and that it arose from a general conformity of judgment in all that related to either. Encouraged by this to a further examination of his opinions, she proceeded to question him on the subject of books. "Books? Can Krunk eat those?" Considering that Marianne had never finished a book in her life, their taste in this was strikingly alike. No books or passages were idolized or even stood by each. In this regard, they conversed with the familiarity of a long-established acquaintance between dull-witted chimpanzees. "Well, Marianne," said Elinor as soon as he had left them, "for one morning I think you have done pretty well in making a mockery of our lives. The floors are covered with shit and spittle, and you have ascertained Mr. Willoughby's opinion to either eat or smash every matter of importance. But how is your acquaintance to be long supported under such extraordinary dispatch? You will soon have exhausted each favorite topic. Another meeting will suffice to explain his sentiments on wishing to defecate upon picturesque beauty and second marriages, and then you can have nothing further to ask." "Elinor," cried Marianne, "is this fair? Is this just? Are my ideas so scanty? But I see what you mean. I have been put too much at my ease, too frappy, too frank. I have erred against every commonplace notion of decorum. I have been open and sincere, where I ought to have been reserved, spiritless, dull, and deceitful. Had I talked only of the weather and the roads, and had I spoken only once in 10 minutes, this reproach would have been spared." "My love," said her mother, "you must not be offended with Elinor, for she was only in jest. I should scold her myself, if she were capable of wishing to check the delight of your conversation with our new friend." She turned to her eldest. "In short, my darling daughter, please shut the fuck up, lest you cause us to appear impolite." Willoughby, on his side, gave every proof of his pleasure in their acquaintance, which an evident wish of improving it could offer. He came to them every day demanding more cockroach-laden tea, murdering several of the lumberjacks over the course of his visits, but always spared from a final fate, thanks to the timely intervention by the Dashwoods, and the fact that the camp's owner, Colonel Brandon, was busy in his own cabin masturbating his wrinkled flagstaff to thoughts of Marianne. Day after day, Marianne filled Willoughby's voluminous gullet with a variety of bugs, all the while expounding upon him of subjects that, in truth, neither of them cared much about, until such time as he began to almost tolerate her presence. His society became gradually her most exquisite enjoyment. They talked, he screeched, they sang, he defecated, and best of all, her mother no longer bothered her about that old prune of a man, Colonel Brandon, he of the unseemly age of 35. In Mrs. Dashwood's estimation, her politeness in tolerating this mess was as faultless as a saint's, and Elinor was kept too busy cleaning up after the brute to censure him in any way that might bring shame to her mother. Marianne, stupid as she was, soon began to believe her own lies. The desperation that had seized her at 16 and a half of ever seeing a man who could satisfy her ideas of perfection had been rash and unjustifiable. Willoughby was all that her fancy had delineated in the unhappy hour, and in every brighter period as capable of attaching her, and his behavior declared his wishes to be in that respect as earnest as his massive arms were strong. Her mother, too, was led before the end of the week to hope and expect, and secretly to congratulate herself on having gained a son-in-law, for as brutish, disgusting, and violent as Willoughby was, if he took Marianne off of her hands once and for all, the family would be that much better off. Colonel Brandon's partiality for Marianne, which had so early been obvious, now first became imperceptible to Elinor. Despite her mother's scoldings, she was a sensible girl, and though she was certain her younger sister was of wit not high enough to remember to breathe, she still realized she'd rather see Marianne pinned beneath the colonel's wretched body night after night than crushed beneath a half-ton monster. She saw it with concern, for what could a former horse ejaculator of 35 hope, when opposed to a creature who could make the rounded side of his head easily resemble the misshapen end? And as she could not even wish him successful, she hardly wished him indifference. She liked him in spite of his gravity and reserve. She beheld in him an object of interest. His manners, though serious, were mild, and his reserve appeared rather the result of some oppression of spirits than of any natural gloominess of temper. Best of all, he was possessed of an intelligence that matched her sister's, meaning the chances of him finding the right hole so as to produce dullard children were slim to none. Perhaps she pitied and esteemed him the more because he was slighted by Willoughby and Marianne, who, prejudiced against him for being neither lively nor young, seemed resolved to undervalue his merits. "Old hairless thing is stupid! Krunk, smash him!" said Willoughby one day, when they were talking of Brandon together. "Give Krunk more grubs, now!" "That is exactly what I think of him," cried Marianne, reaching for a pail overflowing with dead flies so as to appease her suitor's desires. "Do not boast of it, however," said Elinor, "for it is injustice in both of you. He is highly esteemed by all the men at camp, and I never see him myself without taking pains to converse with him, even when he forgets to wear pants." "Then Krunk, smash both of you," replied Willoughby. "Now stop talking of old hairless thing. Krunk not care." "But perhaps the abuse of such people as yourself and Marianne will make amends for the regard of the loggers. If their praise is censure, your censure may be praise, for they are not more undiscerning than you are prejudiced and unjust."
"Krunk have no idea what you just said."
"Old hairless thing, as you call him, is a sensible man, and sense will always have attractions to me. Yes, Marianne, even in a man between 30 and 40. He has seen a great deal of this world, jacked off many horses, and once had a thinking mind. I have found him capable, and he has always answered my inquiries without defecating on the floor or threatening to beat me with a tree limb." "That is to say," cried Marianne contemptuously, "he has told you that in the East Indies the climate is hot, and the mosquitoes are troublesome." No, he hasn't," Elinor replied, confused. "He would have told me so, I doubt not, had I made any such inquiries, but they happen to be points on which I had not been previously informed."
"Krunk like mosquitoes,"
said Willoughby. I may venture to say that his observations have stretched much further than your candor. But why should you dislike him?
Krunk hate all hairless things, you included.
Add to which, cried Marianne, that he has neither genius, taste, nor spirit, that his understanding has no brilliancy, his feelings no ardor, and his voice no expression. And he's old, too. You decide on his imperfections so much in the mess, replied Elinor, once again bringing out the big word she knew would confound her sister, and so much on the strength of your own imagination, and that the commendation I am able to give him is comparatively cold and insipid. I can only pronounce him to be a sensible man, well-bred, well-informed, of gentle address, and not an 8-foot-tall disgusting monster.
Krunk only has this to say.
And with that, Willoughby squatted down and dropped a sizable load of shit upon the floor. And that right there is a excerpt from Sense and Sensibility and Sasquatch, Shingles Book 14, available for both Kindle Unlimited and Kindle, and read by Cassandra Miles in, I believe, Shingles Audio Collection Volume 3, available on audible.com and iTunes. I have been the Arrow of the Gods, sitting in for Rick Gualtieri, who's safe, by the way, and this has been Sense and Sensibility and Sasquatch. I'll see you soon, unless you're an evildoer, in which case I will see you sooner.